My name is Daniel Harlow. I'm a forensic accountant with the firm of Blackwood Meyer and Associates. For 15 years now, I've been in this line of work. 15 years of spreadsheets, of financial statements, of tracing money through the labyrinthine paths the wealthy create to hide their assets. I thought I had seen it all. Or so I believed. I used to think that numbers don't lie. That was what drew me to this profession in the first place, the certainty, the precision. In a world of gray areas, accounting is black and white. Until it isn't. Until you find those discrepancies that can't be explained away by human error or creative bookkeeping, the kind that make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. The kind I found at the Mirrow Estate. This story begins 3 weeks ago. My supervisor, Thomas Blackwood, called me into his office on a Friday afternoon in late October. It was the kind of autumn day where the sun sets early and the shadows seem to stretch longer than they should. Against the windows of our downtown Boston office, leaves rustled as the wind picked up, carrying the promise of the winter to come. "Daniel," he said, as he slid a folder across his mahogany desk. "I've got a special assignment for you." The folder was heavy cream paper, expensive, the kind used for our most prestigious clients. The label read simply, Mirrow Estate. Even the font seemed to convey old money, elegant and understated. The Mirrow family? I asked. Even I had heard of them. Old money. Very old money. The kind of wealth that doesn't just buy mansions and yachts, but silence and secrets, too. Since before the Civil War, the Mirrows had been fixtures of New England high society. Industrialists, politicians, philanthropists. Their name adorned buildings and institutions throughout Massachusetts. The very same. Thomas nodded, leaning back in his leather chair. The last direct descendant, Eleanor Mirrow, died 6 months ago. No children, no immediate family. The estate is in probate, and the executive needs a full audit before the assets can be distributed according to the will. Why us? I asked. Surely, they have their own accountants. Families like the Mirrows typically maintained relationships with financial firms that span generations. The executive specifically requested an external audit. Complete transparency, they said. Thomas's expression was carefully neutral, but I detected something beneath it. Concern, perhaps. I took the folder, felt its substantial weight. Anything I should know? He hesitated just for a moment, his finger tapping once on the desk. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to that hesitation. Warnings I was too blind to see were contained in that single tap. Just be thorough, he said finally. The Mirrow Estate has complexities. Historical oddities in the accounting. The family dates back to before the Civil War. Their record-keeping was inconsistent. Inconsistent how? You'll see. Just document everything carefully. And Daniel, he paused, seeming to consider his words, call me if you find anything unusual. I nodded, tucking the folder under my arm. How long do I have? 2 weeks should be sufficient. You'll be staying at the main estate house while you work. All arrangements have been made. That struck me as odd. I'm staying there. Why not commute from a hotel? The executive insisted. Said it would give you complete access to all records, some of which cannot leave the premises. It's quite remote. Apparently, the commute would eat up too much of your time. I wasn't thrilled about the prospect of staying in some musty old mansion, but I didn't argue. Thomas was right, it made practical sense. And besides, this was potentially a significant client for the firm. I couldn't refuse. I'll head out Monday morning then, I said. Good, Thomas nodded, already turning his attention to other matters on his desk. Keep me updated. The initial documents were straightforward enough. I spent the weekend reviewing them in my apartment. A list of properties, the main estate house in western Massachusetts dating back to 1842, 3 vacation properties, 1 in Maine, 1 in the Carolinas, 1 in California, various investments, stock portfolios, art collections. Substantial wealth, but nothing unusual for a family of their standing. I was to go to the main estate house where the family records were kept. The caretaker, a Mr. Thorne, would meet me there and provide access to the archives. On Sunday night, my girlfriend Sarah watched me packing with an amused expression. 2 weeks in a haunted mansion. Should I be jealous? She teased, sitting cross-legged on our bed. It's not haunted. It's just old, I replied, folding another shirt into my suitcase. And I doubt it's even a mansion. Probably just a big old house that's been heavily renovated. The Mirrows, she mused. Weren't they involved in some scandal back in the day? Something about workers disappearing from one of their factories. I paused. I haven't heard about that. When was this? I don't know. Late 1800s, maybe. I did a paper on labor conditions in New England for a history class in college. Their name came up. She shrugged. Probably nothing. Most of those old money families have skeletons in their closets. Well, I'm just looking at their finances, not digging up historical dirt, I said. But her words lingered with me as I finished packing. Disappearances. Why did that seem to resonate somehow with something I'd seen in the preliminary documents? I arrived on a Monday morning. The drive took me through increasingly rural areas, small towns giving way to forests painted in autumn colors. As I approached, the GPS signal grew weaker, and for the last 5 miles, I relied on printed directions that had been included in the folder. The roads became narrower, less maintained. Twice, I had to stop to remove fallen branches from my path. Just when I was beginning to think I'd taken a wrong turn, the trees opened up to reveal a wrought iron gate, imposing and ancient. It stood open as if expecting me. Beyond it, a long gravel driveway cut through dense woods before opening onto the grounds of the Mirrow Estate. And there it stood. A massive Victorian mansion. 3 stories of imposing architecture with a tower on the east wing that added a 4th. Dark stone, weathered by time, windows like watching eyes, chimneys jutting up like accusing fingers against the gray October sky. This was no mere big old house. This was a monument to wealth and power, designed to intimidate as much as to impress. Gothic revival, if my limited architectural knowledge served me correctly. The kind of place that would have hosted balls and political gatherings in its heyday, where decisions affecting thousands of lives would have been made over brandy and cigars. I parked my car in front of the main entrance, feeling suddenly small and insignificant. As I stepped out, the air felt different here, colder somehow, despite the mild autumn day. The silence was profound. No traffic noise, no airplanes overhead, not even the sound of birds, just the whisper of wind through the trees and the crunch of gravel under my feet. I don't consider myself particularly sensitive to atmospheres or energies or whatever you want to call them. I deal in numbers and facts. But something about that house. It felt wrong from the moment I laid eyes on it. It felt like it was watching me, assessing me, like it knew I was coming and had been waiting a very long time. Mr. Thorne was waiting on the front steps, a tall, gaunt man somewhere in his 60s, with the kind of pale complexion that suggested he rarely saw the sun. He wore a dark suit that seemed a size too large for his frame, as if he had recently lost weight but hadn't bothered to update his wardrobe. "Mr. Harlow," he said, extending a bony hand. His grip was surprisingly strong, his fingers ice-cold despite the gloves he wore. "Welcome to Mirrow House. I trust your journey was pleasant." His formality seemed out of another era. I half expected him to take my hat and coat like a butler in some period drama. He spoke with the hint of an accent I couldn't quite place. Not foreign, but not local either. Old New England, perhaps, the kind you rarely hear anymore. "The journey was fine," I replied, resisting the urge to rub my hand after his grip. "Beautiful country out here." "Yes," he agreed, though without any real enthusiasm. "The Mirrow family has always valued its privacy. Please, follow me." He turned without waiting for a response, leading me up the stone steps to the massive front door. It opened silently at his approach. No creaking hinges here, despite the age of the house. Everything was meticulously maintained. I would learn later that this was characteristic of Mirrow House, immaculately preserved, as if time had stopped somewhere in the late 19th century. The interior of the house was as imposing as its exterior. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, and a persistent chill that seemed impervious to whatever heating system they had installed. The furnishings were old but well maintained, antiques that would have fetched considerable sums at auction. Original artwork hung on the walls, illuminated by strategically placed lighting that seemed to be the only concession to modernity. The family records are kept in the library, Thorne explained as he led me through corridors lined with portraits of stern-faced men and women. Generations of Mirrows, I presumed. Each one had the same piercing eyes, the same set to their jaw, proud, unyielding, and something else, a weariness perhaps, as if they were guarding secrets even from the artist painting their likeness. Miss Eleanor was most insistent that everything be preserved exactly as it was, Thorne continued. Nothing removed, nothing altered. Did you work for Miss Eleanor for long? I asked, trying to get a sense of the household. I have served the Mirrow family for 37 years, he replied, his back straightening slightly with pride. My father served before me, and his father before him. There was pride in his voice, but something else too, a resignation perhaps, as if service to the Mirrow family was both an honor and a burden. So your family has been with the Mirrows for? Since 1891, he said, and then fell silent as if he'd said more than he intended. That date again. 1891, it had appeared several times in the preliminary documents, usually in relation to a restructuring of the family's assets. A significant year for the Mirrow family, it seemed. The library was vast, 2 stories tall with a gallery running around the upper level. Books lined every wall, many of them looking old enough to be first editions. A massive desk occupied the center of the room, its surface cleared except for a green-shaded lamp and a leather blotter. The air smelled of old paper, leather, and something else, a faint metallic tang that reminded me oddly of blood. This will be your workspace, Thorne informed me, gesturing to the desk. The financial records are kept in that cabinet. He pointed to a large filing cabinet in the corner, ornate and clearly antique, but fitted with a modern lock. The older records are in the archive room through that door. He indicated a heavy wooden door set into the far wall, almost hidden between 2 bookcases. Miss Eleanor's personal study is upstairs, first door on the right from the gallery stairs. Her more recent records are there. I nodded, taking it all in. This was going to be more complicated than I'd anticipated. The records were scattered throughout the house rather than centralized as I'd expected. And where will you be if I need assistance? I asked, already dreading the prospect of navigating this labyrinth alone. I have quarters in the West Wing. There is an intercom system, quite old, but functional. The button is by the door. I will hear it wherever I am in the house. Will anyone else be here? Other staff? No, Mr. Harlow. Since Miss Eleanor's passing, I am the only one who remains. The cleaning service comes on Thursdays, but otherwise, we will be alone. Something about the way he said that last part sent a chill through me. Alone in this massive house with only this strange, formal man for company. It seemed incredible that one person could maintain such a large property, but I didn't question it. Old families often had their eccentricities when it came to staffing. I've arranged for meals to be delivered to the small dining room adjacent to the kitchen, he continued. Breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, dinner at 6 o'clock. Will that be satisfactory? Yes, that's fine, I said. Thank you. Very good, sir. I'll leave you to your work. Should you require anything, please don't hesitate to use the intercom. With that, he left, closing the library door behind him with a sound that seemed far too final for my comfort. The lock didn't engage, I checked, but something about that soft click resonated through the room, as if sealing me in. I spent a moment simply standing there, absorbing the atmosphere. The library was beautiful in its way, but oppressive, too. The ceiling was too high, the shadows too deep. The books seemed to watch me from their shelves, their spines forming patterns that almost resembled faces when viewed from the corner of my eye. "Get a grip, Harlow," I muttered to myself. "It's just a house." I set my laptop on the desk, connecting it to the portable hotspot I'd brought along. Cell service was spotty at best out here, but I could at least access my emails and the firm's secure server. I'd been warned that the house had no Wi-Fi, another of Miss Eleanor's eccentricities. Apparently, she had distrusted modern technology, preferring to live as her ancestors had. I spent that first day familiarizing myself with the recent records. The Mirrow finances were, as my supervisor had hinted, complex. The family had fingers in countless pies, investments in everything from real estate to technology startups to art collections. But everything seemed in order, meticulously documented with a precision that actually impressed me. Eleanor Mirrow might have shunned technology in her personal life, but she had been scrupulous in her financial record-keeping. It was when I began to work backward into the older records that things got interesting. Around 1950, the documentation style changed dramatically. Before that, the records were handwritten in leather-bound ledgers, the script becoming progressively more antiquated as I went further back. But it wasn't just the format that changed, it was the substance. There were references to investments I couldn't trace, to accounts in banks that no longer existed or had merged with others so many times their original identity was lost. And there were payments, substantial ones, to entities identified only by initials. COS received quarterly payments from 1923 to 1967. EB received monthly payments from 1899 to 1921. PMT received annual payments from 1872 to 1898, tens of thousands of dollars in an era when such sums were enormous. I made notes, intending to cross-reference these with other documents. Perhaps wills or contracts would explain these mysterious payees. As the afternoon wore on, the library grew darker. I switched on lamps, but they seemed to create more shadows than light. The house was silent except for the occasional creak of settling wood and the ticking of a grandfather clock in the hallway. I found myself straining to hear any other sound, Thorn moving about the house, perhaps, or the wind outside, but there was nothing. It was as if the world beyond the library had ceased to exist. At precisely 6 o'clock, the intercom buzzed, startling me so badly I nearly knocked over my laptop. "Dinner is served, Mr. Harlow," came Thorn's voice, tinny through the old speaker. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until that moment. I organized my notes, locked the file cabinet, though I wasn't sure why I felt the need to do so, and made my way to the dining room, following the directions Thorn had given me earlier. The meal was surprisingly good, a hearty beef stew with fresh bread and a bottle of excellent red wine. Thorn served in silence, then disappeared, leaving me to eat alone in the cavernous dining room. The only sound was the clink of my silverware against the fine china and the distant moan of wind around the eaves of the house. I tried to call Sarah after dinner, but the connection was too poor. Text messages wouldn't go through either. I was truly isolated here. After dinner, I returned to the library, intending to work for another hour or two. The wine had made me slightly drowsy, but I wanted to review my notes from the day. Something about those mysterious payments nagged at me. The initials, the timing, there was a pattern there that I couldn't quite grasp. That was when I first heard it. A sound like paper sliding against paper. A rustling, whispering sound. I froze, listening. It came again, definitely from behind that heavy wooden door. "Mr. Thorn." I called out, wondering if he had entered the archive room from another entrance. No response. The sound came again, more insistent this time. I stood, moved cautiously toward the archive door. My heart was beating faster than the situation warranted. It was probably just mice, I told myself. Old houses had pests. Nothing to be alarmed about. "Hello?" Is someone there? Silence. I tried the door. It was unlocked. I pushed it open slowly, reaching around the frame to find a light switch. The archive room blazed into illumination, a smaller chamber lined with filing cabinets and shelves stacked with boxes and ledgers. Everything was covered in a fine layer of dust, except one cabinet drawer was partially open, second from the bottom in a tall filing cabinet against the far wall. I approached it cautiously. The drawer was labeled 1888 to 1893 in faded ink on a yellowing card. I pulled it open further. Inside were folders organized by year. I lifted out the one labeled 1891. Inside was a collection of documents, correspondence, receipts, legal papers. And among them, a heavy envelope sealed with red wax, the impression in the wax showing a distinctive crest, a mirror with something like wings or flames emerging from its sides. The envelope was addressed simply, in the matter of Hayes versus Mirrow Estate. To be sealed until such time as the condition is met. I turned it over. On the back, in different handwriting, someone had written, "Court order sealed, not to be opened under penalty of law." The wax seal was intact. Whatever this document was, it had remained unopened for over 130 years. I should have put it back. That would have been the professional thing to do. But something, curiosity, fate, who knows, made me break that seal. The wax cracked with a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet room. Inside was a single sheet of heavy paper, the text written in formal legal language. It took me a moment to decipher the archaic phrasing, but when I did, it was a court order dated May 17, 1891. It directed the Mirrow family to cease all activities related to something called the Threshold Experiment and to seal all records, devices, and materials connected to it. The order further specified that the eastern wing of the house, the tower wing, was to be sealed and not used for habitation. The plaintiff in the case was listed as Reverend Jonathan Hayes of the First Methodist Church of the neighboring town. The defendant was Ambrose Mirrow, great-great-grandfather of Eleanor. The most disturbing part was the judge's final note: "Let it be known that the testimony regarding the disappearances of 7 local persons and the unnatural phenomena witnessed by multiple credible observers has been stricken from public record by this court's order. This matter is sealed not for the protection of the Mirrow family, but for the protection of the public mind from truths it is not prepared to accept." I sat there, holding this document, trying to make sense of it. What threshold experiment? What disappearances? What unnatural phenomena? And then I heard it again. That rustling sound. But this time, it wasn't coming from any drawer or cabinet. It was coming from the walls. I wish I could tell you I acted rationally at that moment, that I calmly put the document back, closed the drawer, and went to my room to consider the implications. But the truth is, I panicked. I stuffed the court order into my pocket, backed out of the archive room, and practically ran to my assigned bedroom on the second floor of the West Wing. I didn't sleep well that night. The house made noises, not just the normal settling of an old building, but sounds that seemed purposeful. Footsteps in hallways where no one walked. Whispers just below the threshold of comprehension. And dreams. Dreams of standing before a door that shouldn't be opened. A door in the East Wing tower. I dreamed of figures moving in shadows, their faces obscured. 7 of them, walking through the walls as if they were mist. They gathered around my bed, watching me with eyes I couldn't see but could feel. And behind them, something else watched. Something that used their eyes as windows. I woke gasping at 3:17 a.m. according to the antique clock on the nightstand. The room was cold, much colder than it should have been, even with the house's inadequate heating. My breath fogged in the air before me. And on the mirror across the room, writing appeared in the condensation, not written from my side, written from within. A finger tracing letters from behind the glass. Welcome. I blinked, and it was gone. Just an ordinary mirror reflecting an ordinary room. But the cold remained, and with it the certainty that I had not imagined it. Morning came with gray light filtering through heavy curtains. I rose, showered, and dressed, trying to convince myself that my imagination had gotten the better of me. The nightmare, the writing on the mirror, just stress and an unfamiliar environment playing tricks on my mind. I was here to do a job, to audit the Mirrow Estate, not to play detective with century-old court orders or ghost stories. But I couldn't let it go. Over breakfast, served promptly at 7 by a silent thorn, I made a decision. I would continue my audit work, but I would also investigate this threshold experiment and the sealed East Wing. The audit gave me the perfect pretext to access all areas of the house and all the family records. No one could question my presence anywhere if I said I was tracing financial records. I returned to the library and continued my official work, but with a new focus. I began looking for any financial records that might relate to this mysterious experiment. Payments to scientists or researchers, purchases of unusual equipment, anything that might give me a clue. And I found them, scattered through the ledgers from 1889 to 1891. Payments to a Professor Elias Blackwood of Miskatonic University for consultation on theoretical physics applications. Purchases of electrical equipment from companies that specialized in cutting-edge technology for that era. Shipments of unusual minerals and metals from as far away as Egypt and India. All leading up to May 1891, when the payments suddenly stopped, when the court order was issued. But there was more. After 1891, there were those regular payments I'd noticed before, to COS, EB, and others. Hush money, perhaps. Compensation to the families of the disappeared. And there were substantial donations to the First Methodist Church every year until it closed in 1967. One detail particularly caught my attention, a recurring payment to a law firm in Boston for ongoing representation in the matter of the sealed verdict. The same amount every year for over a century. Whatever had happened in 1891, the Mirrow family was still actively working to keep it hidden. While searching for more information, I came across a journal in a locked drawer of the main desk. The key was hidden in a false bottom of another drawer. I found it only by accident when I removed all the files for review. The journal belonged to Ambrose Mirrow himself. Most entries were mundane, notes about business dealings, observations about competitors, complaints about servants. But scattered throughout 1889 and 1890 were references to the work and our great endeavor. One entry from December 1889 read, Professor B believes we are close to a breakthrough. The equation suggests that with sufficient energy applied through the modified device, the threshold may be breached. What lies beyond? He cannot say with certainty, but the possibilities for power and knowledge are limitless. The risk is justified. Another from March 1890, successful test today. The device operated for 7 minutes before overheating. During operation, the expected distortions were observed. B is ecstatic. Says full-scale attempt possible within 6 months. Must arrange for more reliable power source. And then the final entry related to the experiment, dated May 12, 1891, just days before the court order, disaster. The threshold was breached, but what came through? God help us. 7 gone. The house changed. B says it's still open. Just a crack. Must be sealed. The east wing will be sacrificed. I hear them in the walls now, moving, waiting. Hayes knows something. Threatens exposure. Must be silenced one way or another. The journal ended there. The remaining pages were blank. I sat back, my heart racing. This was far beyond financial irregularities. Whatever Ambrose Mirrow and this Professor Blackwood had done, it had resulted in deaths, in something coming through a threshold they'd opened. Something that was still in the house. The east wing, the tower, it had been sealed for a reason. I should have left then. Called my supervisor, made an excuse, gone back to Boston. But I didn't. Whether it was professional stubbornness or morbid curiosity, I can't say. But I decided to see this through. I needed to access the east wing. Finding the entrance proved more difficult than expected. The obvious doors had been sealed, plastered over decades ago, painted to match the surrounding walls. But old houses have secrets, and I was determined to find a way in. I waited until after dinner when Thorne had retreated to his quarters. Then I began a systematic search of the house, looking for any hidden entrances or forgotten passageways. It was in the cellar that I found it, a bricked-up archway that showed signs of more recent mortaring than the surrounding stonework. Not recent as in days or weeks, but decades rather than centuries. The mortar was crumbling in places, enough that I could work loose several bricks with a tool I found among the gardening implements. It took me nearly an hour of careful work to create an opening large enough to squeeze through. Beyond was a dust-filled corridor that led to a narrow staircase. I played my flashlight beam along the walls, noting the cobwebs and undisturbed dust. No one had come this way in a very long time. But something else caught my attention. Marks on the walls, symbols scratched into the stone, repeating at regular intervals. They resembled nothing I recognized, not letters or numbers from any alphabet I knew, but they conveyed a clear warning nonetheless. Do not proceed. Turn back. Danger lies ahead. I ignored them. The staircase spiraled upward, clearly leading to the tower. I climbed cautiously, testing each step before putting my full weight on it. The wood was old but solid. As I ascended, the air grew colder, and a strange humming vibration seemed to emanate from above. Not a sound exactly, more like a feeling in my bones and my teeth. A resonance that made my skin crawl. At the top was a door, heavy oak, bound with iron. It wasn't locked, just stuck from age. I put my shoulder against it and pushed. It gave way with a groan that seemed to echo through the entire house. I stepped into what had once been a laboratory of sorts. Victorian-era scientific equipment, much of it unrecognizable to my modern eyes, filled the circular room. Dust-covered sheets draped over larger apparatuses. Books and papers were scattered across worktables, as if the occupants had left in great haste. But it was what dominated the center of the room that drew my attention, a large circular platform, perhaps 12 feet in diameter, surrounded by what appeared to be copper coils and strange crystalline formations. At regular intervals around the platform stood metal rods, each topped with a spherical finial. The device, it could only be the device mentioned in the journal, was positioned at one edge of the platform. It resembled nothing so much as a projector of some kind, though unlike any I'd ever seen. Lenses and mirrors were arranged in complex configurations, focusing toward the center of the platform. And there, at the center, was nothing. A space that my eyes kept sliding away from. A spot that seemed darker than the surrounding darkness, even when I shone my flashlight directly at it. A threshold. I approached cautiously, drawn by a curiosity I couldn't explain. The air felt different near the platform, heavier, charged with something like static electricity. My skin prickled, and the hairs on my arms stood on end. That's when I noticed the markings on the floor around the platform. They had been scratched deeply into the wood. Symbols I didn't recognize, forming concentric circles around the entire apparatus. Protective wards, perhaps. Whatever their purpose, someone had taken great care to create them. I stepped closer still, now at the edge of the platform. The darkness at the center seemed to pulse, to breathe. And I could hear something. Not with my ears, but somehow inside my head. Whispers. Promises. Secrets. Just one step more, they seemed to say. Just cross the threshold and see. I'd like to say I resisted out of courage or wisdom. The truth is, what stopped me was fear. Pure, primal fear that froze me in place as the whispers grew more insistent. And then I heard another sound, a real one this time. Footsteps on the stairs behind me. I turned to see Thorne standing in the doorway, a look of resignation on his gaunt face. "You shouldn't be here, Mr. Harlow," he said quietly. "What is this place?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. What did Ambrose Mirrow do here? Thorne sighed, a sound of infinite weariness. He opened a door that was never meant to be opened. A door to somewhere else. Somewhere that has been trying to get back in ever since. He stepped into the room, carefully, staying outside the circle of symbols. The disappearances mentioned in the court order, they were not deaths, Mr. Harlow. Death would have been kinder. But why not destroy it? Tear down this whole wing. They tried. In 1923. 3 workers went mad. One walked into the threshold and changed. The family had to deal with him. After that, they realized destruction wasn't an option. Containment was the only solution. I glanced back at the dark spot at the center of the platform. It seemed larger now, expanding slowly. It knows you're here, Thorne said, his voice dropping to a whisper. It's always hungry for new minds, new souls. The symbols hold it back, but they weaken with time. Each generation of my family has renewed them, strengthened the barriers. The payments in the ledgers, I said, understanding dawning. Cos, E.B. Custodians of the seal. Each generation of my family. And Eleanor Blackwood, the professor's granddaughter, who provided the theoretical knowledge needed to maintain the containment. And PMT. A shadow crossed Thorne's face. Protectors of mortal thresholds. They were specialists. Called in when containment failed. In 1897, they did what was necessary. The dark spot pulsed again, and with it came a wave of whispers, louder now. I could almost make out words. We need to leave, Thorne urged. Your presence excites it, makes it stronger. I didn't need to be told twice. I backed away from the platform, careful not to smudge any of the symbols on the floor. As we retreated toward the door, I noticed something I'd missed before. Photographs pinned to one of the work tables. Sepia-toned images of people, 7 of them. The disappeared ones, I presumed. But in each photo, the face had been carefully scratched out. Don't look at them, Thorne warned. Don't remember their faces. That's how it finds a way in. We hurried down the spiral staircase, the whispers following us until we reached the bricked-up archway. Only when we were back in the main cellar, and Thorne had hastily replaced the bricks I'd removed, did the voices fade. What happens now? I asked as we climbed the stairs to the main floor. You leave, Thorne said simply. First thing in the morning. You complete your audit from Boston. Any questions you have, you direct to me by phone. You never return to this house. And the court order? The journal? Leave them. They belong here. With the burden they describe. But the will, the distribution of assets, people will come here. Thorne's thin lips curved in what might have been a smile. Miss Eleanor's will specifies that the house is to be maintained exactly as it is, in perpetuity. A historical trust has been established. No one will live here. No one will disturb the East Wing. The Mirrow line may have ended, but the duty remains. Your duty, I said, understanding. He nodded. And my son's after me. And his daughter after him. I spent one more night in that house. I'd like to say I slept, but that would be a lie. I lay awake, listening to the sounds of the house, the creaks and groans that might have been settling timber, or might have been something moving behind the walls. And the dreams, when exhaustion finally dragged me under. Dreams of standing before that threshold again, of taking that one final step, of seeing what lay beyond. I left at dawn. Thorne saw me off with a formal handshake and a final warning. Don't speak of what you've seen, Mr. Harlow. Not if you value your sanity. I completed the audit from Boston as instructed. The Mirrow Estate was distributed according to Eleanor's will, the bulk going to various charities, with substantial sums set aside for the maintenance of the house and the continued employment of the Thorne family as caretakers. I never returned to Mirrow House. Never wanted to. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear those whispers. Still feel the pull of that threshold. And I wonder, what if I had taken that step? What would I have seen? What would I have become? There's something else. Something I haven't told anyone until now. When I was packing to leave Mirrow House that last morning, I found something in my suitcase that I hadn't put there. A small hand mirror in a silver frame. Intricate patterns etched around its edge, patterns that, if you look at them just right, form the same symbols I saw on the floor of that tower room. The mirror's surface isn't reflective in the normal way. It's darker, deeper somehow. And sometimes, when I look into it from the corner of my eye, I don't see my own reflection. I see a door. A threshold. And it's opening. Just a crack. I've tried to get rid of it. Thrown it away, buried it, even tried to break it once. But it always comes back. Always appears among my possessions again, as if it's found a threshold of its own. A way back to me. I think I'm going to have to go back to Mirrow House. To speak with Thorne again, if he's still alive. To return the mirror to where it belongs. And to finally learn what lies beyond the threshold. This is Daniel Harlow, signing off. If you're watching this and I haven't returned, stay away from Mirrow House. Stay away from mirrors. And whatever you do, don't listen to the whispers. They lie. They promise knowledge, power, transcendence. But what they really want is a way in. A new threshold. Don't let them find it in you. Wait, the camera's still running. I thought we were done. Can you cut that last part? The bit about going back. I don't know, getting into character, I guess. Seriously, can we cut now? I need to. What was that? Did you hear that? Hello? Is someone else here? Oh God, it's here. It followed me. I need to share something else with you. Something I noticed after rewatching the footage of my first recording. I tried to delete it, edit it out, but it always comes back. The timestamp. Did you see it? The timestamp on the recording shows May 17th. The anniversary of the court order. I didn't realize it when I started filming, but it knows. It's been watching me through the mirror all this time, waiting for me to tell this story, to spread its influence beyond Mirrow House. I've been receiving strange messages. Emails from addresses that don't exist. Texts that disappear after I read them. Always the same message, the threshold awaits. Sometimes just fragments, awaits, appearing in random spam, in newspaper headlines I glance at, in the patterns of coffee grounds at the bottom of my cup. I started seeing the symbols everywhere. In the grain of wooden tables, in the cracks on sidewalks, in the steam rising from my morning coffee, in the arrangement of trees against the skyline, in the constellations at night. The world is covered in thresholds, in doors waiting to be opened. I just never noticed them before. Last week, I went to see a specialist, a professor of occult studies at a local university. I showed her a drawing of the symbols from the tower room. She went pale, asked me where I'd seen them. I told her everything. She called them the Orpheus configuration, an ancient pattern meant to create doorways between worlds. She said they date back to Sumerian times, always associated with disappearances, with whispers from the walls. When I mentioned the mirror, she insisted on seeing it. I brought it to her office the next day. She examined it through a magnifying glass, careful not to look directly into its surface. This is old, she said. Much older than the Mirrow family. The silver work, this isn't Victorian craftsmanship. This is medieval, at least. She pointed to tiny inscriptions around the edge, nearly worn away with age. These are names, she said. 7 of them. I felt cold then, ice in my veins. The disappeared, I whispered. She nodded. Sacrifices, more likely. Willing or unwilling, I can't say. But their essences are bound to this mirror. It's a tether. An anchor for whatever lies beyond the threshold. Can it be destroyed? I asked. She shook her head. Not by conventional means. And attempting to do so might only make things worse. Break the mirror, and you might break the last barrier holding it back. I asked her what I should do. She had no answer, just advised me to keep it contained, to never look directly into it, especially not at night. She offered to keep it in her office, secured in a lead-lined box. I agreed. Left it with her. Felt lighter, freer than I had in weeks. That night, I dreamed of the tower room again. But this time, I wasn't alone. 7 figures stood around the platform, their faces blurred and shifting. And in the center, where the darkness had been, stood an 8th figure. Tall, impossibly thin, with too many angles to its form. It had no face, just a reflective surface like a mirror where a head should be. It reached for me with elongated fingers. Come, it said, though not aloud. The word was inside my head. You've been chosen. The 8th seat is empty. The configuration is incomplete. I woke up sweating, heart pounding. The mirror was on my nightstand, though I'd left it with the professor. Its surface seemed to ripple in the dim light. I called her the next morning. No answer. Went to her office. Her assistant said she hadn't come in, hadn't called. They were concerned. It wasn't like her to miss classes. I know what happened to her. The same thing that's happening to me now. The same thing that happened to those 7 people in 1891. The threshold is calling us home. I've made arrangements. If you're watching this, then my lawyer has followed my instructions and delivered this recording to you. I've left detailed notes about everything I've discovered about the Mirrow Estate and the threshold, the journal, the court order, copies of everything. I'm going back to Mirrow House tomorrow. Not because I want to. Because I have to. The mirror gives me no choice. It's calling me back. The whispers are constant now, I can barely hear anything else. But I'm not going unprepared. I've learned things these past weeks about the symbols, about the threshold, about what Professor Blackwood and Ambrose Mirrow were really trying to do. They weren't just opening a door to somewhere else. They were inviting something in. Something that's been trying to fully enter our world for centuries. The 7 disappeared weren't victims. They were meant to be vessels. But the ritual was interrupted. The court order saw to that. Now it needs an 8th. It's chosen me. But I have a plan. The professor of occult studies helped me modify the symbols before she disappeared. If I can get back to the tower room, back to the platform, I might be able to close the threshold permanently. Or at least, that's what I'm telling myself. The truth? I don't know what will happen. I just know I can't run anymore. This ends where it began, at Mirrow House, in that tower. Whatever waits for me there, at least the nightmares will stop. At least the whispers will end. If I succeed, you'll never hear from me again. The Mirrow Estate will just be another old house with a strange history. If I fail, well, watch for the signs. Symbols appearing where they shouldn't be. Whispers from empty rooms. Reflections that don't match what they're reflecting. And if you ever receive an invitation to audit the Mirrow Estate, run. Don't look back. Don't try to understand. Just run. I have to go now. The mirror is calling. The threshold awaits. Goodbye.